Thank you for watching this online class presentation from Cedarville University. Cedarville offers more than 150 sought-after programs of study, including liberal arts, the professions, and health sciences. Our largest schools are nursing, engineering, and business. We invite you to learn more at cedarville.edu.
So we've seen Genesis 12, 1, 2, and 3 before. We've played this game before where we bring out the arrow and say, which one of the promises is going to be fulfilled now? But immediately we can take one of these off the table, right? Because one of them is done. The one which is done is nation. Yeah, and Exodus talked to us about that. So when it comes to Joshua, you say, land or leader? Now you got a 50-50 chance, right? And you would probably think of land, but Joshua is a really amazing leader, and an awful lot is made about his leadership, the way he takes over from Moses. His name in Greek would be Jesus, right? He crosses the Jordan River, so you might think leader, but in fact, first impression maybe is the best here. It is all about the land. So let's dig into it, and here's where we start, right? We start right on the east side of the Jordan, and we're getting ready to cross the Jordan. We haven't done it yet, and we're getting ready to divide it up into 12 sections. So with that, let's start then with the very first couple of verses. And I want you to notice that in the first couple of verses, you see land splashed all over, right? I mean, from the very first verse and the second verse, take these people into the land. Every place you set your foot, it's all about territory and the boundaries of it, right? But it's a little bit more than that. I just want to make sure you get the nuance here, that this is actually land with a twist, right? And what's the twist? Well, take a look at the verses carefully. Do you notice a little bit of nuancing in there? Do you notice a little bit of the way it's flavored or shaded? This is not just people getting the land. What is it? You see the text? Maybe this will help. It is land which is in fulfillment of the promises, right? So, just to say it very clearly, this is not just a group of people looking for a place to live. It is, in fact, God fulfilling his promises, as he said to Abraham way back in the beginning. So, let's begin with this little tidbit in verse 8. As God says to Joshua, I want you to be successful, his advice to him is, verse 8, this book of the law must not leave your lips. You must memorize it day and night. And so immediately you say, oh, wait a minute. Let's see now. This book of the law, I think I actually know what that is, right? And you do. So when God says that to Joshua, what book is he talking about? Answer? Deuteronomy. Let's do it one more time. Answer? Deuteronomy. Yeah, very good, because that's going to be the key answer. This is such an incredibly foundational book. So Joshua is not actually a king, right? But you don't have to be a king, you just have to be a leader. If you want to be a leader, you got to get this word and have it right here all the time, right? So Joshua certainly is an example of that as he leads well, and certainly as God gives him the direction to do it here. So one more question though. Where was that in Deuteronomy that God said to do that? For kings? If you want to be a good king, you got to do this every day? 17, yeah, just a little practice, right? You got to know that for the next celebration. Deuteronomy chapter 17. Educational psychologists tell us that you have to say something or encounter a fact 17 times before you actually learn it. Right? So we're at least 2 of the way there. One more time, Deuteronomy chapter 17. Yeah, now we're 3 of the 17 times there. All right. Right. So the very first stop on the way is a place called Jericho. Let me introduce you to Jericho here just a little bit, because it is a unique kind of geography that we don't have in the States. And let me show you what it looks like. This is obviously from the air looking to the north, and in the left-hand side, way down here where it's green, the only spot where it's green, this is Jericho. So to the left there is to the west, and you can see we're going up into the mountains. And to the right is more of the plain area, the Jordan plain, the kind of the flat area that we'll see here. Here's another picture of it looking to the south, and off in the distance here, it's a little phased out, but that's actually the Dead Sea. Again, Jericho right here, the only green spot anywhere near. This is a better picture of the Jordan plain. The Jordan is actually flowing out in here, and the mountains to the west, and Jericho is sitting right here. Now, the reason why Jericho exists is because of this. From ancient times, even till now, what happens is when the rain comes down on those western mountains, it goes down into the ground, it hits bedrock, and then when it hits the bedrock, it has nowhere to go, so it flows down to the east and comes out right here. So the other thing you should know about Jericho is not just this spring, but the fact that it is right at sea level. And when you go to the west, just 13 miles, you're up in Jerusalem, but those 13 miles, because the elevation goes up 3,000 feet, is about 30 or 40 degrees more. Right? So it can be 30 degrees, it can be snowing up in Jerusalem, and it's 70 degrees down here in Jericho. It's just amazing. So instead of going to Florida for the wintertime, all you had to do was travel 13 miles to the east and go down, and it got a whole lot warmer. Right? And this is exactly why Herod has a winter palace in Jericho. I mean, it's really cool. It really works out well, right? He can get 40 degrees to his February, and that's kind of nice, right? Just by going 13 miles down here. But the trouble is it gets a little bit hot in the summertime, and so if you don't have this water, you don't have anything, right? So Jericho is actually like this beautiful retirement community or a beautiful place you would want to live, and so it's kind of like the very first stop, and it's beautiful because this stream has been flowing, this spring has been flowing, beautiful, clear, cold, pure water from way back thousands and thousands of years ago till now. So this is actually a quick picture of the ancient city of Jericho, where the walls were. And we go back and do a lot of archaeology. It's fascinating stuff to see what happens there, to see the walls fell out instead of in. And so let me get on then to the story of taking this town. Now, we're not going to take the town yet, but the spies are going to go in and take a look at the town. And of course, this is where we meet Rahab. Now, the way I have titled this 2C is Rahab's ? Faithful response to God. Because I'm not quite sure, I want you to help me out here. Whose story is this really? Is this the spies or is this the prostitutes? How should we title this section? Should we put them at the top or her at the top, right? So open up your Bibles to Joshua chapter 2 and just kind of skim it over and tell me whose story is this really? And I want you to do here, what I'm just kind of a little Bible study technique test. As you read over the story, can you get the writer's gist? Can you get the writer's emphasis? What is the writer trying to emphasize? So find some literary clues and tell me whose story this is. If you're going to find them, find the clues, it won't take you very long. So talk to me. What do you see? Yeah, that's. I mean, it seems so simple, but it's so significant, right? When do you find out Rahab's name in the story? Not very hard. When do you find out Rahab's name? First verse. When do you find out their names? Never, right? So if the Bible doesn't give them a name, if Joshua doesn't even care to give them a name, that's kind of identity, they're just sort of background foil, and she's the one who's really front and center, right? So this really is about Rahab. It's not about the story of the spies. It's not about the story of strategy of spying out the land. It is to emphasize her. She's going to be kind of a big deal here for reasons we will only find out when we get to chapter 7 after her story seems like it's over, right? So you'll notice a couple things about her. Her loyalties to the king of Jericho versus the king of Israel. When she has a conflict between obeying one or the other, she chooses the king of Israel, right? So she hides the spies. We know all about that story. And I want you to notice this. She says in verse 11, when we heard the news of what your God had done, talking about the Red Sea and taking some of the kings on the east side of the Jordan, when we heard the news of what your God had done, we lost our strength, and no one could even breathe for fear of you, for the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on earth below. Now you tell me, does this sound like a faithful response? Really does, right? So she knows who God is. She knows who Yahweh is, and she has put her faith in him. So that kind of describes what she is about and what she does and why she does what she does. Notice the three conditions given to her. Now, I'm not going to ask you what these three conditions are per se on a test, but I want you to notice that they say put a red rope in the window, right? So the soldiers know who to spare when they come back, and then gather your whole house in, and then finally, don't tell anybody what you've done. So they give her three things to do. Now, the question is, does she do them? As you've read through the rest of the story, does she do those things or does she violate them? Kind of key to the story, as it turns out, she does do all three. Why is that significant? Find out later, right? But leave it there for right now. So, with that then, I want you to notice the geography and the theology. Again, here is a picture of this Jordan Valley area. And you can see the Jordan there, right? You can see this amazingly big, huge, look at it right there. There it is. Wow, huge river. Get up a little close to it, it's like that. Now, I got to admit, in modern times, it's probably not as big as it was in ancient times, partly because we're better at irrigation and siphoning off the Jordan River up north in Galilee, right, for our agricultural purposes. So it probably was a little bit bigger back here, but this is not a huge river. It's not a big deal to get across. It's not like, the Mississippi River or something like that. Except that at this particular time of year, when Israel is on the east and Canaanites are on the west, this, just for a couple of weeks, it does actually flood and fill up that floodplain area that we saw that's so wide, right? So just during a certain couple of weeks during the year, does it actually get that big and become a formidable force, which is exactly where we are when it's time to cross. So what you have to understand then is that this barrier is giving a little bit of temporary respite, or so they think, to the Canaanites. And so the Canaanites over here thinking, yes, we're safe for a while because we got this big barrier between them and us. And what's most important to them is they see this barrier as a representative of their God. In much the same way that the Nile was worshipped as a life-giving source, this is as well. So let me talk to you about Baal and why Baal would be identified with the Jordan River. Baal is actually the god of the rain, or the god of the raindrop, which doesn't sound all that impressive, right? Because if you wanted to be an ancient Near Eastern god, I would pick something like this, It's like, that's cool, that's noisy, that's loud, it's thunder. The hammer is just so nice, right? But Baal was not this kind of impressive, overwhelming god. Baal was actually better represented as a raindrop. Now, I know if you're going to choose your superpower, the hammer is much more impressive than the raindrop. Unless you actually live in the ancient Middle East and you realize, no. The raindrop beats the hammer by about 100 to 1. And here's why. Because everything in an agricultural setting where it's hot begins with the raindrop. If you don't have rain, you don't have water to drink. If you don't have rain, your crops don't grow. If you don't have rain, your animals don't grow. If you don't have rain, you don't have anything. And so the God who would bring the rain was everything. And this is why Baal is such an incredibly popular God, right? And in fact, he's even called the one who rides in the clouds. Now, as you're reading this in Psalm 68:4, what the verse goes on to say is, for the Lord is his name, Yahweh is his name. But what you don't realize is that the Israelites are kind of taking this over. They're kind of hijacking it because Baal, who was the god of Canaan, was described as the God who rides on the clouds. They're like his chariots, right? He brings the water and the rain. And the Israelites come along and say, no, it's not Baal. It is Yahweh. He's the one, right? And you see this all the way through the Old Testament, right? With the story of Elijah on top of Mount Carmel, the prophets of Baal, hey, who's going to bring the rain, right? So this is Baal. This is who Baal is, the god of the rain, god of the raindrops. So when the Canaanites look at the Jordan River, they're saying, look, here's our God, right? We are protected. Our God is between us and them. Our God just showed up to protect us, which is exactly why God says, this is a really good time to come. Because now I'm going to do in the Jordan what we did in the Red Sea, but it's going to be even better because when I walk through and we cut this thing off, it's like, serious psychological warfare. Here's what Yahweh does to your gods. Now, why does God do that? Because God is trying to get them to see who God really is, who really is God. And so if you will turn from Baal, who is a loser, obviously, and turn to Yahweh, your life will be a whole lot better, right? And so Rahab makes this choice, and the Gibeonites make this choice. And anybody could have made this choice, but they refuse, and so therefore their culture, which is completely anti-God, is destroyed. So the Canaanites say, oops, maybe we're not safe for a while. That was the theology for the Canaanites. Here's the theology for the Israelites. Can you imagine what it must have been like for Joshua just stretching his wings here as a new leader And everybody who had been following Moses for 40 years says, Joshua, this is really poor administration, right? Moses would have thought ahead and not brought us here at this time. This is a really bad time to want to try to cross that big river, right? And so God says to him, this very day, I'm going to begin to honor you, and this is how you will know the living God is among you. Now, it's interesting. If we had come 3 weeks before or 3 weeks later and the river was so small you could just walk right across it, what would have happened? Well, you'd gotten across the river. What would not have happened? You would have not gotten to know that the living God was among you, just like he was 40 years ago. Right? So, why did the Israelites cross the river? A, to get to the other side, or B, to get to know God in the process. And that's always the reason for trials and difficulties and trouble, right? And your first impression, my first impression is always, how do we get to the other side? And God says, just slow down just for a second and think, maybe this is an opportunity for me to show myself powerful in your life. So, with that then, let's get to 4C, the people's faithful observance of the covenant. Now, in your notes, did I highlight faithful? Did I underline it or something? I really want to do that because that's the big idea here. It is their faithful observance of the covenant, because you've got the river here, and Israel was here, but now we have moved across the Jordan over here. Now, it just seems like, a couple of miles in geography, but in military terms, what has just happened here? In military terms, where have we gone from and to?
From a place of protection to a vulnerable place.
Exactly. You're going from a place of protection to a vulnerable place. You have just gone into enemy territory, right? And this is where Joshua gets the big idea to have the people circumcised. That's the faithful observance of the covenant. Now, we didn't talk about it much in class, but if you remember, there was a place back in Exodus chapter 4 when Moses was on his way to Egypt to rescue the people, and it said God sought to kill him. Remember this story? And he hadn't circumcised his sons, and so his wife had to do it, and it was kind of this really weird, strange, gross story. And she circumcises the sons and says, you're a bridegroom of blood, or something like that to him, right? And the point was, God says, look, Moses, you can't go back to be a messenger of the fulfillment of the promises when you haven't taken the expression of faith in those promises in your own family. You haven't led your family well here, right? So God rescues him and we go on. But the same thing is true here. What we're doing is we're moving into the land in order to fulfill the promises, and yet we've had some unfaithful parents over the last 40 years who did not circumcise their infant boys, so that now we're going to fulfill the promises of the land, and yet we haven't taken the sign of faith in the promises, circumcision, and so God says, no, first things first here. This is a good time to do it. Now, why is this a problematic time in some people's ideas? Well, another story we didn't talk about a lot, but it was in Genesis 35, I believe, with the story of Jacob's daughter named Dinah. Remember this story? Dinah goes into Shechem. If you read the story carefully enough, read the text carefully enough, and the prince of Shechem rapes her. And she runs back home in tears, and he convinces his dad, the mayor of the town of Shechem, I want to marry this girl. So they go to Jacob, and they don't talk to Jacob, but they talk to Simeon and Levi. And they go to Simeon and Levi, and they say, my son wants to marry your sister. Can he marry your sister? And Simeon and Levi are really, really good. They are really good sons of Jacob. And they say, oh, it just warms our heart so much to know what your son has done to our sister. And we feel like, yeah, you'd be good husband material. But we can't do this because you're not circumcised. But if you circumcise the entire town, yes, you can marry our sister. So they go back and the entire town gets circumcised. Now, I'm not going to go into the surgery here, but let me just say that an 8-day-old infant is very different than an adult male. When the entire town gets circumcised, on the third day, when everybody is laying around thinking, oh my goodness, this is such a terrible idea, Simeon and Levi show up and they destroy everyone. Why? Because they're so sore they can't even get out of bed, right? And so it's kind of, a gruesome story, but you take all that back here, and Joshua gets across the barrier and says, hey, guys, I think this is a great time to circumcise the entire army. So what do you suppose his generals are going to say? The general's going to look at him and say, Joshua, are you nuts? Moses would never have done this. Moses would have planned better. If you do this, you disable the entire army. It's just going to be like Shechem all over again. We won't have anybody defend us, but there's nothing. I'm the army. We don't. Just God, right? And Moses says, yeah, I think that's the point. Or Joshua says that's the point, right? And so, in fact, they do get circumcised here. God does protect them from everywhere, and so that's why, again, this is the people's faithful observance of the covenant. And so all along here, you're getting this lesson over and over and over again. You know, this holy warfare, this idea of taking the land is not about the strength of your army. It's about the faithfulness of your army. Are you going to do what God asks you to do? Right? And so each time here so far, we've seen them doing that, and things are working out pretty well. So they do. And that leads us then to the next step, which is taking Jericho. So on the way, in preparation to take Jericho, Joshua is out scouting it out, and he meets this guy in military uniform, who actually is the angel of the Lord, but looks like a man. And he says to him, are you one of us or one of our enemies? Joshua was a previous middle school teacher, and he used to ask multiple choice questions. Is it A or is it B? And the angel chooses C and none of the above. Right? Neither. So you look at that and you think, how there is no neither. You're either for us or against us, right? And he says, no, I'm not either one of those things. Neither. I am the captain of the host of the Lord and have just arrived. So can you interpret this for me? Can you explain to me why he says neither? When in fact it certainly seems like he is for them. But is he? And what is the lesson here? Why does he say neither, none of the above? Going to make you figure this one out. What do you think?
Maybe they don't necessarily I don't know, maybe this is a thought. The angels maybe aren't necessarily pleased to be helping them, but God in his mercy is you need to.
Like the angel isn't pleased to be helping him, like the angel saying, well, God sent me on a mission. I'm not really excited about this, but I guess I will. Yeah. It's an option. It's the best option we have so far. You got another one?
I think I answer he was seeing if Joshua was with him versus the angel being with Joshua.
Is that just a semantic thing? He's saying you're seeing with Joshua is with him instead of him with Joshua? I'm messing with your mind. I'm doing the same thing God is doing here. You're absolutely right. He's absolutely right. Did you hear what he said? And it sounds like a semantic difference, like it's no big deal, but it's a huge deal. He's not simply saying, I'm here to help you on your way. He's saying, I'm here with a mission, and if you want to help me, that's great. Right? And this is so significant when it comes to what Israel's mission is and what your mission is too. And most of us assume that God is just a helper to help us get what we want. And if you think that, you are entirely mistaken about what the mission is. The captain of the Lord host says, no, I'm coming as the one in charge. And I have a mission. I have a goal that I'm accomplishing in this world. And if you would like to get in line behind me and follow along and be a part of this mission, you will find your life. If you get out ahead of me and try to lead on your own and expect me to support you in what you do, then you might as well go talk to Baal. Because if you try to save your life, you will lose it. Right? If you lose your life and get in behind my mission, you will find it. And so that's the message always along the way, and it certainly is here as well. And Joshua gets it, right? And certainly you see this statement here, remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you're standing is holy, right? So it reminds us of what incident, what really huge incident. Where else have we seen, take off your sandals for the place where you're standing is holy? The burning bush, right? It reminds us of that. It's a little bit different, though, because it's a man, not a miracle. I'm saying that the burning bush was a miracle. The man is clearly a miracle because it's God, but he looks like he's military, right? So let me just say it this way. Moses, the miracle, Joshua, the man. You see the difference? How does God work back in Exodus with Moses? Through the plagues and the miracles, right? How is God going to work with Joshua? Through the military here, right? So it's appropriate to the situation. So, the central campaign, the successful battle for Jericho, notice the brilliant strategy. Have the priests come around and blow the horns. It's supposed to be a joke. Do you get it? I mean, it really is. I mean, I'm sure that's how Joshua's generals felt too. Joshua, you just talked to God himself or to the angel of God himself. What's the strategy? I'll bet this is really good. Are we going to use the hot oil and the battering rams and the flaming arrows? The military guys getting all excited. Joshua says, no, we're gonna blow the horn. What? We're gonna have the priests and musicians go and blow the horns. What in the world good is that going to do? And it's supposed to be a joke, right? Because God says, look, I want to do something so silly that no one else would ever think of this, so you will know that if these walls fall down, it's because God was behind it all. And again, same message we've seen so far, right? It's not about the strength of your army. It's not about your cool technology. It's whether or not you sit back and do what I ask you to do. And these horns do not bring the walls down because of the sonic penetration here. This is just an absolute cool miracle. God is doing something which is supposed to look like a joke, so it's very clear where the power comes from. So with that then, notice the directions. We're going to take it, but you're not going to take anything from it. This is going to be like a first fruits. And a first fruits offering was one, like in the springtime, you're all hungry, you haven't had a tomato forever, and the first tomato comes and it's right there and it's really juicy. And a first fruits offering is when you say, okay, I really, really would like to eat this thing, but I'm going to take it and give it to God by faith, knowing He will give me more. And so with Jericho, God says, this is a really beautiful place to live. And guess what? No one's living there. You're giving this over to me, as it were. So you don't take anything. You're not going to live here. This is a first fruits offering by faith, knowing I will give you the rest of the land. So the rule then is you don't take any of it. And of course, that causes a little bit of a problem with the next story. It's the defeat of Ai. The problem here is that there's a guy named Achan who stole the bacon. Okay? Achan, when they went into Jericho, took some stuff and no one knows about it, and it doesn't show up until this story, the next place we're going to take, which is a place called Ai. So Achan stole some of the riches and the Lord was furious. So the spies go up to Ai and say, we don't really need a lot of men, 3,000 people is enough, Ai is very, very small. Now let me show you a little picture here. We're looking to the east. Dead Sea is point number 1 there. As you move up, that's Jericho. You can see a little bit of the green oasis. And then when you move up to Ai, point number 3, you're moving up 3,000 feet high. From the sea level to around 3,000 feet high. For 13 miles, you're going up 3,000 feet. And that's a huge incline, right? But once you get up there to Ai, you're on this big ridge that goes from north to south. Once you get up to Ai and take the high ground, you can march right into Jerusalem. Right? And it still works militarily, even the 1967 war. When the Israeli army got up to where Ai is, where it is now, where it was, when they got up there, they said Jerusalem was taken. Why? Because once you get up there, you can just march right in. Right? So Ai is this naturally strategic spot to go to, and once you get up there, boom, you can get right into Jerusalem. So they go up and they try to take Ai, and what happens, of course, is the men of Ai killed 36 of them. Now, when you have 600,000 men, taking away 36 ain't that big a deal. But notice it says the people's strength melted away like water. And let's see, I think I've read that before in this book somewhere, haven't we? Where did we read a phrase like that our strength melted away like water? It's kind of significant if you can tie it together in your head, you know? Rahab said that when we heard what your God did, our strength melted away with water. Now the tables are turned, right? And so Joshua tears his clothes, lays face down on the ground, and throws dirt on their heads. Like, is Joshua just a drama queen here? Why is he overreacting? And the answer is no, because he understands that once the momentum shifts, once the Canaanites get in their head, hey, we can do this. This is a really big deal. So he cries out to God and says, oh God, what is wrong? And God says, I'll tell you what's wrong. Achan stole the bacon, right? And so let me just take you to the passage here. Joshua then said to Achan, chapter 7, my son, give glory to the Lord. Did you take it? Achan said, yep, it's true. I stole it. I saw that Babylonian garment and those shekels of silver, and I took them home and hid them in my house. And so Joshua says, you know, bud, you have troubled us today. Let me see if I can find the text up here. You've troubled us. And so Joshua, together with all Israel, took Achan and the silver and the gold and his sons and his daughters and his cattle and his donkeys and his sheep, to the valley of trouble, Achor. And if you remember, Andrew Peterson mentioned this, right? He was talking about it comes up in the book of Hosea as well, the valley of trouble. Joshua said, why have you brought this Achor on us today? The Lord will bring Achor on you today. Then all Israel stoned him, and after they had stoned the rest, they burned them. Over Achan, they heaped up a large pile of rocks, which remains this day. Then the Lord turned away from his fierce anger. Therefore, that place has been called the Valley of Achor, Valley of Trouble, ever since. Now, you might feel like that's harsh, but what this guy has done, really, you could just put him up on a murder trial for murdering 36 people. That's what he's done. This is a treasonous sort of act. And so where I want to go now is to compare him with who Joshua wants to compare him to. And I hope you've caught this by now. Rahab and Achan are absolutely perfect pictures to compare. If you remember a long time ago when we took a look at the genealogies in Genesis 4 and Genesis 5, remember that? And we noticed that the 7th generation down, Moses had really told us a lot about this guy named Lamech, how blue he was. And in chapter 5, he took the 7th generation down and told us a lot about that guy. What was his name? Enoch, and how the two compared. He's doing the very same thing here with Rahab. That's why when in chapter 2 we said, is this a story about the spies of Rahab? And we looked carefully, literarily, and realized, no, this is all about Rahab. He's trying to tell us about Rahab. Why? Because when we get here to chapter 7, he's really trying to tell you about Achan. Why? Well, just compare the two. And what you're going to find out is this. Let's just start out with a couple of comparisons here. In terms of gender, we're going to start out easy. Rahab is female, Achan is male. Not that hard to get to, but it's fairly significant because in this culture, who has the power? He clearly does, right? And then you think about the heritage. What's her heritage? She's Canaanite, and what's his heritage? If you look at the story, he's not just Israelite, he's a certain kind of Israelite. What is he? From the tribe of Judah. He's a Judahite, right? This is really good because you're the leader tribe, right? Messiah could come through you. You could be Messiah. Right? What's her status? But yeah, we know her status, right? And what's his status? Well, he's an upstanding Judahite male. He's got everything going for him. What is her future? Well, this one gets a little bit, if you think about it, you realize what her future is supposed to be. What should have happened to her. And you can get incredibly specific, more than maybe you think you can. But think about it. Because the author has given you enough details. If you think about it, you can figure it out. What should have been her future? You'll totally make my day if you can figure this one out. She should have been crushed beneath the wall, right? Because he's told us that she actually lives in the wall. And so when the walls fall down, she's supposed to be crushed in her house. And what are the walls made of? Not made out of concrete cinder blocks, made out of rocks. Ringing any bells here? She's supposed to die under a pile of rocks. What is supposed to happen to him? What is his future supposed to be? He's supposed to live in the land, but what else happens to him? He dies under a pile of rocks. You see how they're switching roles here? He dies under a pile of rocks, which is what she was supposed to do. She lives in the land like he was supposed to do. When you think about the faith which they had, how much faith does she have? And this is the reason why I ask you, how many directions was she given and how many did she follow? The answer is, she's 3 out of 3, right? She has much faith by the way she lives. And so how many things did he have to do? Just one. You just said one thing, Achan. Just one thing. Don't take the stuff. And how does he do? He fails, right? So he has no faith here. So what they're doing here is they're totally switching. And we could go through a lot more comparisons here. And some of the most poignant ones are things like this. Like, what was the result on their family? What was her result of her faith on her entire family? They all lived, right? Because the story tells you gather all your family in here and you save them and rescue them, and she blesses her entire family. What does he do to his family? They all die, right? But the most telling one is relationship to Messiah. So what is his relationship to Messiah? Well, as it turns out, he could have been the father or grandfather or great-grandfather of Messiah, And yet, after the story's over, he can't do that. Why not? Because his entire line is cut off, right? So all potential is lost. And then for her, what's her relationship with Messiah? Are you serious? She's a Canaanite prostitute. She has no chance at all. Until you look in Matthew chapter 1, you realize her name is there. Wait, hold on. Oh, how in the world does her name get into the genealogy of Messiah? Well, we're not told exactly, but you can figure it out. What happens after the battle is over? She meets some nice guy from the tribe of Judah and marries him, and she becomes the great-great-great-grandma of Messiah. All reality is found. So the reason why I think the writer gives us Rahab and Achan is because he wants to say, look, you know, when it comes to taking this land, or to be totally specific, when it comes to living a Christian life, right, it ain't about all the advantages and the head starts you get. It's only about one thing, and that is your faith. When it comes to taking this land, the person who has nothing going for them but has faith has everything. And a person who has every advantage but is not faithful has nothing going for them. And so you just keep seeing the same message being driven home over and over and over again. So very quickly then, the victory at Ai, because we do win at Ai, and God says this time, but this time you may keep the captured goods. Oh, Achan, buddy. Oh, look at that. If you just waited, right? And isn't that the way temptation is? Got to have it, got to have it, got to have it now. God says, no, just be patient. In my time, I will give you what you need. Achan, just be patient, man. Just wait. Trust in God to give you what you need. So they do take the city, and then we stop at Shechem. Now, I just want to show you this place very quickly. Shechem is between two important mountains, Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. This becomes important in the Bible, becomes important in John chapter 4, because Jesus speaks to a woman at a well at this place, and she says, our ancestors worship on this mountain, right? Because the Samaritans worship on Mount Gerizim. It all kind of goes back here, because Moses said to Joshua before Moses died in Deuteronomy, when you get in the land, you make sure that everybody recites the blessings and the curses of Deuteronomy 28. So that you'll be reminded that if we're going to succeed, it'll not be because of our strength, but because of our faithfulness, right? Same message over and over and over again. So half the people get on Gerizim, half get on Ebal. One side recites blessings, the other side recites cursings, just so they remember, if we're going to stay in the land, we're going to take the land, it's because of God's blessing due to our obedience, right? So that's where they do. At this point then, let's divide the land up. And we divide the land up here in 13 to 24. And the very first thing I want to tell you about is the city of Hebron. And Hebron is a beautiful spot because it's the highest city in Israel, in southern Israel. Why do we care? Well, because that means it's cool, right? And in a hot land, that's a really nice place. Not only that, but this is where Abraham and Isaac and Jacob are buried. So there's a guy who wants it, and of course his name is Caleb. And Caleb goes to Joshua and says, can I have Hebron? And Joshua says, yes, you can. Now, just let me make this clear. What Joshua has done is broken the major coalitions. He hasn't flushed out the opposition from their cities yet. So when Caleb says, can I take Hebron, what he's saying is not, can I just go up and walk in and take it? He's saying, do I have permission to conquer the people who inhabit it now? And Joshua says, yes, you do. So it says here, Hebron used to be called Kiriath, that is the village of Arba, after Arba, who was the greatest man among the Anakites. And so it's a really bittersweet time because there's not a whole lot of drama here. Caleb just goes up and he takes it. It says, who is the biggest, baddest Anakite there is? Arba. Oh, okay, I'm going after that one, right? And he goes and he takes it. It's bittersweet because there's this 85-year-old guy who beats the biggest Anakite. I mean, just imagine, anybody here have grandpa or great-grandpa who's 85 years old? Can you imagine going out to war? And Caleb says, I feel as strong today at 85 as I did at 45. And God preserves him and does that for him. And so that's the positive part. That's the sweet part. But the bitter part is this. He could have been there when he was 45. If the rest of the group had had the kind of faith. And then there's a sweet story about his daughter who says, since you've given me land in the Negev, give me also springs of water. Now, this is in the midst of a long section of where the land is being given out. And you say, why does Joshua take time to do this? And I think the reason he does is because of a verse I asked you a couple weeks ago or last week to remember, and it was this one. In Numbers 14, God promised, because Caleb follows me wholeheartedly, I'll bring him into the land, and his descendants, Aksa, will inherit it, and it'll be good. And as you go through chapters 15 and 16 and 17 and 18 and 19, if you did read that, you know what I'm talking about. Scintillating stuff, right? Answer, no. You probably went to sleep as you read through it because it was such detail and seemingly so boring, and yet God says, no, to the people who got it, this was amazing material because they wanted to know, are you going to give to us what you promised? And the answer is, yeah. I will risk boring you to death in order to make sure you know God keeps all of his promises. So let me jump right to the end then and take a look at Joshua's address concerning breaking the covenant. Now, we're here in the very last chapter, chapter 24, and Joshua takes the people back here. Right? This is the place where the covenant was renewed in chapter 8, and they did the curses on Gerizim and Ebal. And so he brings them back here, and he says, okay, guys, I'm getting ready to die, and I have watched you grow up. I've observed you from the outside. I've noticed some tendencies in you, and so I just have a couple of things I want to say. Right? And so here's what he does. He sets up this stone. Now, this is interesting. Obviously, you can tell this is a picture with some apartment buildings in the back. But this stone that's right here, we don't know if this is the stone that he actually set up or not, but it dates back to that time because of the construction around it. We can tell it goes back to that time. This could be the stone for a memorial that Joshua sets up. He says, I want you to remember this day. I want you to remember this speech. And so here's how the speech goes. In chapter 24, let me just take a look in my Bible here. Chapter 24 and verse 14, he says to the children of Israel, he says, you need to serve the Lord. Now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness and throw away the gods your forefathers worship beyond the river, right? So he says two things here. Serve the Lord and throw away your idols. And their response in verse 18 is very telling. Right? Their response is, well, we will do this, right? We will serve the Lord because he is our God. And that's their response. So Joshua says in verses 19 and 20, I'm not sure you guys heard me. Let me just say it again. And so in 19 he says, you're not able to serve the Lord. He's a holy God. He's a jealous God. He will not forgive your rebellion. If you serve foreign gods, he will turn and bring disaster. So he says, serve him and don't follow those foreign gods. And their response in verse 21, but the people said to Joshua, no, we will serve the Lord. At this point, I think Joshua says, wait, hold on. Read my lips, okay? Because I don't think you're hearing me. Verse 23, he says, throw away the foreign gods that are among you and yield your hearts to the God of Israel. So yield to him and throw them away. And they say, okay, now we get it. And the people said to Joshua, we will serve Yahweh our Elohim and obey him. Now stop right there. Tell me what you see. Tell me you see it. Please tell me, please tell me you see what just happened here. Is this amazing or what? And no one ever teaches. The only thing we think Joshua 24 is good for is writing little plaques. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord and give it to people who don't like for weddings, right? And this is so much more sobering and serious what's going on here. It's not what they say, right? You see what's important here? It's what they fail to say. They never say, we will get rid of the foreign gods among us. Joshua says, you can't do that. You can't have one foot in the world and one foot in God and expect to last very long. If you do this, it's going to be disastrous, and say, no, we got this. It's okay. Why is chapter 24 here? I'll tell you exactly why it's here. And if you've done any reading ahead, you should be really, really worried about where we're headed. Because in the book of Judges, things are going to get uglier and uglier than you can ever imagine. And people love the book of Joshua and all the victory and the great fun that's here and the excitement and the victories. and the stories of Rahab and all that sort of stuff. When you get to the defeat of Judges, you think, wow, how did they just flip the switch? And the answer is they didn't. The switch didn't just flip. What happened is Joshua 24. The people never decided to get rid of the foreign gods. They kept the secret compartments separate from God and held on to the stuff that gave them whatever they thought they wanted. So, let me just close the book like this. The land has been taken mainly. The nation is good. And the curious way, don't put your books away yet, just hang on. Don't miss this. The curious thing is that this book finishes with a mention, and Joseph's bones were buried in verse 32. Now, as amazingly good interpreters, you know who Joseph is, right? Joseph's just not a guy. Who is Joseph in the storyline of the book? Joseph is the best picture of the seed we've ever had, right? He's the best picture of the leader we've ever had. And when we see verse 32, all it does is point to us about how empty that last checkbox is. But I'm here to tell you, I'm really excited, I'm really hopeful, because I think we're 2/3 the way there, and I'm really pretty sure that the very next book is going to be about fulfillment of the leader that we all need. Don't you think? Can't wait to see it.